Hello, today I'm going to attempt to answer one of the questions I get asked the most often. How do I get my small engine to work? Although this is a very broad question to ask, I'm going to attempt to answer it in the most concise way possible. Typically, people will tell you that there are three things required for any small gasoline engine to run. That is compression, ignition in the form of a spark, and fuel. I argue that there's also a fourth just as important thing, and that happens to be timing. And we'll get to that later. So without further ado, let us continue with our process in which we will get any motor to run. The first part of this process is going to be to check the compression. First thing we're going to do is check, of course, if the motor is seized. We're going to pull the cord slowly and hard to see if the motor turns over. There are a lot of reasons why a motor could end up becoming seized, but that is out of the scope of this video. This one seems to be alright, so we're going to move on. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to knock off two at once. We're going to check compression and we're going to check spark at the same time. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to remove the spark plug. This you're going to need a spark plug socket as I'm using here, and you're going to rotate the spark plug counterclockwise to loosen it off, and then you're going to turn it out by hand. So this one is going to be a little bit trickier for a lot of do-it-yourself mechanics because not everybody owns a compression tester as you see here. A compression tester is used to measure the exact compression inside the cylinder of a motor. Now I want to be 100% clear, you do not need a compression tester in order to get a small engine to run. It is beneficial to figure out exactly how much compression inside of the motor, but you can simply pull the cord a few times, and if you feel the engine having resistance when you pull the cord, that is typically indication enough that it does in fact have compression. Now, once you have the compression tester inserted, you're going to want to pull the cord 5 times very hard. You should be getting somewhere in the range between 60 and 80 psi. We seem to have about 65, 70 psi here, and that's pretty normal for a small lawnmower engine such as this. If you have significantly less than that, it'll be time to stop because usually there'll be internal damage that you really don't want to deal with. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to check for spark. We're going to insert the spark plug into the cap and then place it on the ground of the small engine. This is very important because if you don't have a solid ground, you will not see the spark. Next, we're going to go up to the mower and we're going to turn it over as hard as we can and see if we see a blue spark. If we see a nice bright blue spark, our spark plug and our ignition system is fine. If we don't, typical spark issues will be solved by simply replacing the spark plug. Now, if you have good compression and good spark, now would be the time to start diagnosing your fuel system. It is safe to assume that if you have a good spark and good compression that the fuel system is in fact your problem. A lot of people typically jump to the fuel system being the main problem because a lot of the times it is the main problem, but that's not always the case. Now, what I like to do to diagnose the fuel system is actually almost hilariously simple. What you'll have to do is you have to put the spark plug back in. Next, you're going to want to take off your air cleaner and then simply put some gasoline down your carburetor. Once you've put a splash of gasoline into your carburetor, you're going to turn the motor over and it's likely going to start. When it starts, if it stops almost immediately, you know that your carburetor is plugged, likely your main jet, and you're going to have to take apart your carburetor and clean it. If the motor still does not start, the flywheel key is sheared. It sets the timing on the engine and typically breaks if a rock or a hard object is hit. The key simply needs to be replaced. If you follow those steps, most likely you will have a motor that runs. If you do not have a motor that runs, you can follow the link to the videos which will explain every other component in details, whether it be problems with your ignition system, problems with your compression, or problems with your fuel. Each one of those will detail specific instructions how you can diagnose and fix each of those individual components.